Hello and welcome to the Franchise Tag Podcast with me, your host, Freddie Hall, joined once again with Andrew. However, our birthday boy, Adam, is not going to be with us this evening. And it must pain him that it's his birthday because we've got such a special guest on with us this evening. Marcus Grant is joining us all the way from LA, only 4 hours away from the SoFi Stadium where the Super Bowl 56 is going to be played in just a matter of days. It is Super Bowl week. We are pumped here in the UK. I'm sure there's a lot of excitement over in America as well. We are in the final stage of the NFL season. Some sadness it is, of course, but also joy as well for the big game that will be happening at 11:30 our UK time on Sunday night into the Monday morning. Make sure you book Monday off because it's going to be a late one. And hopefully it will be a fireworks show between Matt Stafford and Joe Burrow. It's going to be a heck of a one. Marcus Grant, fantasy guide for NFL Fantasy. Lots of appearances on NFL Fantasy Live, on the Fantasy Live podcast. A man who surely is topping all of his leagues every season because he just knows so much. Has it been a successful year for you, Marcus, or is there a few leagues you don't really want to talk about?
Yeah, there's a couple out there that you sort of pass aside. I think it's what happens when you play in so many. This year I was in 14, I think. So you learn to prioritize. Like there are certain leagues. There's leagues I play in with guys I've been friends with for 20 years. And like those leagues I care about. There are leagues where if I'm doing well, I care more. But yeah, I'd be lying if I sat here and said I was doing great in all 14 of them this past year.
Well, from us to you, I mean, anything that you get, we're going to talk about some fantasy football later. Obviously, any advice you give, I mean, you got to take it a little bit of gospel. The man who is involved so much with NFL fantasy. We talk a lot about fantasy on our show. We do a fantasy football show that Andrew hosts, and it is to do with our league of friends that the Franchise Tag podcast does sponsor. However, it's just a bunch of friends that got together. It is a redraft league. It's a 14-team league. Andrew, am I right in that?
Yeah.
14 team, and I mean it's a mixed bag every year. We have some guys who are very successful. Me and Andrew not so great this year. However, we'll be talking about later on how maybe your advice, Marcus, can improve our gameplay for next year. Super Bowl week is upon us. If you want any of your Super Bowl betting, go check out Star Sports Betting. They are in our Twitter bio for all your betting needs for the Super Bowl. If you want to bet £5, £5 on what called the Gatorade is, if it's heads or tails, I mean that's very much in the media at the minute about the calling about. If you want to go and do that, go check out Star Sports Betting. Now, like I said, Super Bowl week, the Rams, Cincinnati Bengals, only 4 hours from where you are there, the SoFi Stadium. It's going to be a heck of a show, isn't it, Marcus? These two quarterbacks really contrasting, really. Matt Stafford in the league for a long time with the Lions. We have Joe Burrow, who's really only played his first full year this year. Is it going to be a fireworks show in Hollywood?
I think so. First, let me just correct you. I'm not 4 hours. I'm 4 miles. Like I'm like 10 minutes. It's like a 10-minute drive from where I live to the stadium. So I'm
4 miles. Close. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No. But no, I think it's going to be interesting. I do think it's going to be a high scoring game because these are two offenses that when they are at their best can move the football, can score a lot of points. And you're right. It couldn't be more different when you talk about the quarterbacks, right? You had Matthew Stafford, who had been in the league for a number of years, who'd never had any playoff success, had just a couple of playoff appearances with the Detroit Lions, but had never won a playoff game. Now, all of a sudden, he is playing literally in the biggest football game of his life in his first year in Los Angeles. Meanwhile, Joe Burrow takes over a team that a couple years ago was awful, right? I mean, they were struggling to win games at all. He had a good start to his rookie year, then had a major knee injury, now comes back this year. And the Bengals, I think, shocked the world by getting to the Super Bowl. And I would say that, that team, that Cincinnati team, maybe has as much or more confidence than any team I have seen coming into the Super Bowl. And they have a right to be. They've played really good football. They went in and they've beaten some good teams. I mean, to go into Kansas City and beat the Chiefs on their home field to get to the Super Bowl says a lot. So I'm expecting that this is going to be a really entertaining game this week.
Actually, right. We'll go back to the AFC and NFC championship games. The Bengals beating the Chiefs 27-24 in overtime to win it. We talked a little bit about it, me and Andrew, with a guest last week. However, we'd love to get your take on it. The Chiefs really been riding the hot hand in the last few weeks. I think there's very much recency bias in the NFL about, we forget about the Chiefs week 1 to 5 were not a great team. There was question marks about whether they could get to the playoffs. Cincinnati really in the last 5 weeks have really shone. The question marks of Ja'Marr Chase in the preseason, he seemed to not be able to catch a cold in winter. He seems to be catching anything that's 80 yards down the way. He seems to be going for touchdowns every game. I mean, in this game, it was just exciting and a firework game. How impressed were you with the Bengals against the Chiefs here? And the Chiefs did not look bad, but there is definitely glaring signs there, I think, with the Kansas City Chiefs of where they need to improve.
I think there were. You know, what was interesting about the Chiefs is that you talk about, their offense. I feel like it sort of fizzled down the stretch. And they had a couple of nice games kind of late in the season, but their offense, I don't think, was as scary late in the years we're used to seeing. Meanwhile, defensively, they were really bad at the start of the year, and defensively they continued to get better. And I don't think their defense really played a bad game, but their offense sort of disappeared on them in the second half. They had that play right before halftime where they had a chance to score a touchdown. They throw a little swing pass to Tyreek Hill. He gets tackled. The time runs out in the half. And that was really, I think, the last bit of fireworks we saw from the Chiefs offense in that game. And I think a lot of the credit for that goes to the Cincinnati defense. I don't know what it is they know or what they have figured out, but those teams have played twice this season, and both times in the second half, the Bengals defense came out and they shut down the Chiefs. They did it late in the regular season and got a big win. Then obviously they did it in the AFC Championship game to get to the Super Bowl. So I don't know what formula Cincinnati has figured out, what they know about the Chiefs after halftime, but I'm sure there are, 30 other teams around the league that would like to bottle that and figure out how to use it whenever they play Kansas City, because it's apparent that they have figured something out about this offense.
Andrew, you brought up in our last show about the question marks with Patrick Mahomes and with some of the criticism that he had at college. Do you want to maybe explain some of them, of what you analysed at Patrick Mahomes at college, and for Marcus to give his point of view on it?
Yeah, I mean, when the scouting reports came out before he was drafted, they were talking about the fact that during his time, if he ever had something go wrong for him or he tried to push too hard, that he went from bad to worse. His decision making wasn't very good once something had upset him or something hadn't gone his way. He was also scouted that he tried to make the big time plays all the time rather than taking the checkdowns and things like that. I think my point was last week that because he's been so good since he joined the NFL, I think we forget that he is still very young, and in terms of a career in the NFL, he's not been in that long. Is it because he's been so good for so long coming in that we forget that there was those red flags from college that are now starting to creep in every now and again?
I think so. I think that's a fair criticism. I think the shorthand term for it is hero ball, right? Where he stands there and he really is trying to be a superhero. And sometimes it works, right? And we have seen him make these just mind-blowing plays where you just you take your DVR and you run it back because you're like, I can't believe that actually happened. But then I think you get in a situation where what you saw a couple weeks ago, where he stands there and he's waiting and he's trying to make that special play, and it's not happening. And I do think you can see him get frustrated. I think you saw that in the Super Bowl last year against Tampa Bay when the Buccaneers really frustrated that offense and didn't let him do anything. I think you saw it again against Cincinnati. And I think the difference is when you talk about that, I think he kind of got in that mentality in the middle of the season, and the Chiefs offense went into a slump, and there were a lot of people asking what's wrong with Kansas City. And I think it's because he kind of got stuck in that mode. And I think when they came out of it, it was because Mahomes was more willing to take those checkdowns, right? To take what the defense gave him. And I know it's not always sexy, right? Like everybody wants to see him, run around and then heave one 40, 50 yards down the field to Tyreek Hill. Or they want to see him make that crazy sidearm throw or the left-handed throw and get those big plays. As a lot of wise people have said, you will never go broke taking a profit, right? So if you can just get a couple yards here and there, sometimes it is a smarter play. It's not maybe as exciting, right? It doesn't make the highlight reels with you throwing a 3-yard check down to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. But sometimes that's all you need. And I think sometimes he probably does forget that because I think he is so used. We're so used to seeing them make the big plays. I think he is so used to making those big plays that I do think sometimes he gets frustrated.
Well, let's talk less about the Kansas City Chiefs losing that game and more about the Bengals. It seems like a lot of their big-time players that have really shone, the players that they got in the offseason. I mean, Mike Hilton, which pains me as a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. I hated to see him go. He seems to be doing so incredibly over in Cincinnati. You have Trey Hendrickson as well that they brought in. How well do you think they did in that offseason to sort of build this roster to be able to get to where they are now?
I think they did a great job. And I think you talk about the pieces they added defensively. It's also sort of a reminder that, yes, you can certainly build through the draft, but I think being able to be successful in free agency really is a key to building a football team, right? You can get some of those mid-level veterans without breaking the bank. And sometimes those guys are the key to being successful, to kind of getting over that hump there. And I think they did a really good job at it. And, what I think is maybe the bigger thing, everybody went into the draft expecting that the Bengals were going to draft an offensive lineman early on, right? The thought was Penei Sewell was going to be the guy there. Instead, they went with Ja'Marr Chase, and a lot of people, not to discount what they thought Chase could be, but didn't feel like that was the right move for Cincinnati. Now, here they are, in the Super Bowl, a chance to win a championship, thanks in large part to Ja'Marr Chase and what he's been doing for most of the season. I still think long-term, they do have to look at building that offensive line. I mean, we saw a few weeks ago in the playoffs, Burrow was sacked, I think 9 times, I believe against Tennessee. That's not sustainable. So at some point, they are going to have to go out and find some quality offensive linemen. But I do think that, for everybody sort of criticizing how they built this team in the offseason, the proof is in the pudding. Here they are, in Los Angeles with a chance to win a championship. So it's sort of hard to argue against what they've done.
Yeah, I was one of those guys that when we did the show that was saying they need to take an offensive lineman. I loved Ja'Marr Chase and thought he was great at college, but I was like, they can't get worried about getting him injured and things like that. But when you talk about the veterans that have brought in, when you listen to interviews and things like that from the veterans, they said they wanted to come to Cincinnati because they wanted to play for Joe. Do you feel like his personality and the way he is at such a young age that he's got veterans to go, I want to come play for that guy? What do you think it is about him that's drawing the players?
I just think, for lack of a better term, it's swag, right? And you're right. There've been a lot of those guys who came over to Cincinnati who said that we wanted to come play for Joe Burrow. I mean, I think it's going back to his time in college and seeing what he was able to do at LSU, winning the championship. I mean, I don't know that there's any picture that better captures the essence of Joe Burrow than him having won a college championship, sitting in the locker room smoking a cigar, right? I mean, I think that is sort of the essence of Joe Burrow, and the fact that that's really who he is, and it carries over, and it seems genuine the way he interacts with his teammates, and just the confidence that he carries himself with. I mean, what was it in the AFC Championship game? He's walking into the stadium. He could have been an extra from like a 70s action movie, right? I mean, he's got the turtleneck and the big gold chain and the sunglasses. And I think all of that attitude, the way he carries himself, and then, not to discount the way he plays, right? You can have all that attitude, but if you stink on the field, nobody's going to follow you. But the fact that he's got that attitude and that confidence, and he goes out and he backs it up on a weekly basis on the field, I think that's only going to draw more people to him. And I think now with the success they've had, Cincinnati might end up becoming sort of a destination for free agents, which is not a thing we have said a lot over the past couple of decades. But I do think that they really have found their franchise quarterback, that they have found their franchise cornerstone. It's going to really help them, not only be successful in the short term, but maybe stay successful over an extended period of time.
Yeah, he's definitely made.
I'm very aware that I'm on a little bit of a delay. Sorry. Apologies. No, I know I'm on a little bit of a delay. Sorry. No, go ahead, Andrew.
That's all right. Essentially, you see a lot in the media of the state of Ohio getting mocked about quite a lot of time. It's nice to see that he's actually made it a cool destination to go to.
Yeah, it really has been. I mean, look, the two professional football teams in the state of Ohio have not had a ton of success. I mean, really within my lifetime, right? I mean, the Browns have sort of been kind of a punchline for a long time, and I know they're getting better, right? They are improving, but they've been a punchline for a long time, and same with the Bengals. So, if one of these teams can have some success, I mean, look, I know how much Cleveland loves the Browns, and they are really, really desirous to have a winner there. And I think the same can be said for Cincinnati, right? It's been a long time since they've had some success. So I think that city is really ready to rally around that team. And so it's kind of cool. I think it's cool for the league. It's certainly cool for those cities if they can have some kind of sustained success in the next few years.
Moving on from the Cincinnati Bengals, why don't we talk about the LA Rams and their win over the San Francisco 49ers, 20-17. We said on our show that if it was a fireworks show in the Bengals and Chiefs, it was a blue-collar, hard-hitting, smash-mouth game at the SoFi Stadium, because these guys really went at it with each other. How impressed were you with the Rams? It really feels like the names on paper for them are really starting to step up and really starting to show. The Von Millers, Jalen Ramsey, Aaron Donald, the Cooper Kupp, OBJ, they all seem to be elevating now at the correct point. How impressed have you been with them down the stretch here?
Yeah, no, they played some really good football. I think it's interesting the way you sort of describe those games, right? Where you talk about the Bengals and Chiefs being kind of a fireworks kind of flashy show versus the two California teams playing out here in Los Angeles being more the blue collar. It's sort of the reverse of kind of how those two regions of the country are viewed, right? Midwest tends to be more blue collar. You got Hollywood and LA. Anyway, but I will say that the Rams have actually started really putting things together at the right time. I will say it sort of hurts my heart because I grew up as a 49ers fan. So it was kind of a frustrating day in that respect, especially because my wife is a Rams fan and she let me know all about it for the rest of the day after that happened. But you're right. They not only have gotten contributions from their big name players at the key times, right? Stafford, Kupp. You talk about the guys on defense like Aaron Donald, like Jalen Ramsey, like Von Miller. All those guys really stepped up when the Rams needed them to. But I think more than anything, I think it was a mental hurdle for them. Having lost, 6 in a row to the 49ers, I think at some point it becomes more mental than physical, because I don't know that the Niners are a significantly better team than the Rams are. I don't know that they have more talent, but for whatever reason, they figured out a way to win games, including what was just that great game in Week 18 that got San Francisco into the playoffs. So I think you sort of credit the Rams at some point for looking around and saying, look, we know we can win this game. We think we're the better team. We just have to go out there and prove it. And they were able to do that down the stretch. Defensively, they got pressure on Jimmy Garoppolo. They forced him into some bad throws, into some mistakes. Obviously, they get the interception at the very end that sort of closed it out. But I do think, part of it is having your stars step up and be stars when you need them to, because then that gives something for everyone else on the team to kind of look toward and say, hey, look, man, if Aaron Donald's going to come out here and be a beast, we got to support him. We got to go out and play just as well as he does. And I think that really meant something for that team in the NFC Championship.
There's been a big debate on this podcast between me, Freddie, and Adam, that Adam seems to think that the LA Rams are trying to buy the league and they're trying to buy a Super Bowl. And I've been on the side of the fence of they've just gone out. That's the way they do business. They've gone out. They've done great contracts to bring in some veterans. What's your take on that? How do you feel about them giving all their draft picks away and going for these veterans? Do you think they're trying to buy the league, or do you think it's good business?
I mean, this may be a cop-out, but both things can be true, right? Like, I think there's sort of, it is a different model of doing things, right? It's not something that we're used to seeing. Normally teams will try to stockpile draft picks and build and try to build with younger, more inexpensive players, right? I mean, I think the one thing we have seen in a lot of respects is the way to get to a Super Bowl is to find a young quarterback, for instance, that you can get on a relatively cheap contract. I say cheap, I mean, compared to, say veteran quarterbacks or something like that. I mean, we saw it with the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. We're seeing it now with the Bengals and Joe Burrow. We saw it, I think, years ago with the Seahawks and Russell Wilson. If you can get a young quarterback that is really talented, that guy can take you a long way without having to necessarily break the bank. The Rams have decided to not do that. I mean, they've got some draft picks, but they're not building this thing through the draft. They feel like they've got a good core. And where they're going to spend their money is on big name veteran stars to bring in. That's why they go and they make a deal for Jalen Ramsey. That's why they go and they get Odell Beckham and Von Miller, because they feel like this is what they're going to do. Now, maybe at some point this thing comes back to bite them. I mean, they don't have a first round draft pick for another 2 or 3 years at the earliest. So maybe eventually this bites them. But right now, I think when you're especially so close and you feel like your window for winning a championship is open, I think it's not unwise to go and maybe try and go all in. I mean, that's been the phrase here in Los Angeles. The Rams are all in. They've pushed all their chips to the center of the table. I don't think that is necessarily unwise when you feel like you are this close. So, look, if they go out and they win on Sunday and they get a Super Bowl title, then I don't think anybody can really criticize. Now, if they lose and they never get back and this whole thing falls apart, then I think you're going to have a lot of armchair quarterbacks kind of criticizing this thing. But right now, it seems to be working. So I don't really have an issue with it. I also say that as a fan, I'm a baseball fan as well. And I'm a fan of the Los Angeles Dodgers, who have gone out and pretty much done the same thing. And it won them a World Series a couple of years ago. So I feel like it'd be hypocritical of me to criticize the Rams for doing it as well.
Yeah, it's definitely a system that the Rams are being very specific around, and Sean McVay has definitely had an MO for this for a while of getting these players in, and like you said, if it succeeds and it wins games and it wins them a Super Bowl, who is anyone to criticize? And maybe a couple more teams might start to look that way of how to run their team and run their organization if this does get pulled off, because they produced stars last time they went to the Super Bowl against the Patriots. It didn't work out. They've now gone down a little bit of a different route. And it's all going to culminate in the SoFi on Sunday. Like I said, it would be bad of us, Marcus, to get you on and not talk about some fantasy football. So we are definitely going to talk some fantasy football in a minute. However, as you can probably tell from people who've viewed, I've moved locations, try and improve my Wi-Fi. Like I said, it's been a bit of a shuffle around at my house. We're trying to optimize things. As you probably know, Wi-Fi in England, they're all just as bad as each other. But we've got a few things over here. If you can move them over from one table to the other. We are running a competition for all you people watching the Franchise Tag podcast that is going to run to when the Super Bowl kicks off. As soon as that ball is kicked, we are closing this competition. After we have finished this video, go and comment underneath this video of who you think will win the Super Bowl, which will enter you in the competition. We have a couple of prizes. These are all going to one lucky winner. We have a Taylor Heineke signed Washington, admittedly Washington football team helmet. It is not the Washington Commanders helmet, unfortunately. That didn't come through in the post in time. Nor do I think Taylor's probably signed any of them yet. But you can win that. You can win a Ohio State t-shirt. This is from Columbus, Ohio. Our editor is from Columbus, Ohio. She went back home to Columbus over the Christmas period and got that for us. So make sure, for your college football fans, Ohio State there. We have a Buffalo Bills hat. This is from this year's Sideline Crew. It's got the Bills on the side just here. Very nice as well. We have a Miami Dolphins reversible hat as well for you to win in there. And this might be a bit heavy, but if I can reach it, we have a full-size Lombardi trophy. Maybe not full size, maybe a little bit smaller, maybe than the Vince Lombardi trophy. However, it'll be going your way. All of that stash will be going your way. Just comment under this video on our YouTube channel who is going to win the Super Bowl, Cincinnati or LA Rams, and you'll be entered into that competition. Like I said, competition will close as soon as that ball is kicked in Super Bowl 56. And what a night it is going to be. Fantasy football, Marcus. You know a little bit about it. We like to think we know a little bit about it. However, we did very much underperform, both of us, this year. We're going to ask you a couple of questions. Firstly, I'm going to kick off with the questions. What's your fantasy mantra you live by? Are you a running backs first guy? Are you a wide receiver first guy? Are you looking for that quarterback in the later rounds? Are you going for the special quarterback at the top of the rounds? What is the mantra you live by when you're going into your drafts?
What I've really focused on the last couple of years is, one, I want to make sure somewhere in the first 2 rounds, I get a quality running back. I want a top tier running back, somebody that I know that I can count on every single week to have in my lineup. So that's something that has to happen in the first 2 rounds. Somewhere in the first 2 or 3 rounds, I also want to get a quality tight end. It's been the position that has been the shallowest in fantasy football for a while now. And so I know people like to stream the tight end position. God bless you if you do. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of study, and it doesn't always work out. Whereas I have really made it a point. Last year, I made it a point to draft Travis Kelce in a lot of places, or Darren Waller, George Kittle. Look, I know that Travis Kelce didn't have the kind of bang up year that we're used to having from him, but still, you could feel confident every week that he was going to give you a good number. And I think at a position where there's just not a lot of depth, I want that peace of mind. So, those have been two of the things that I really have lived by. I really sort of changed on the quarterbacks. I used to be a wait on a quarterback person. I think you still can. I tend to go a little bit earlier. I'm not going crazy early. Like, I'll never have Patrick Mahomes because he's going to go in the 2nd or 3rd round. I'm never going to have Josh Allen because he may go in the 2nd or 3rd round this year. But look, if I can wait until, say, the 5th or 6th round, and a guy like, in the past, Dak Prescott was there, Russell Wilson was there, even Justin Herbert this past year was there. I can get a really quality, probably 2nd-tier quarterback that I can feel confident in each week and not necessarily burn a 2nd or 3rd round pick to get him. So that part has changed, but the running backs early, the tight ends early is a thing that I have been all about the last 2 or 3 years.
And I mean, also as well, we've got to talk about some of the players that performed well this year. Who did you think performed better than you expected at the start of the season? Who was the player that people were stealing in the late rounds that really shone and bloomed, and you thought, wow, like this guy should have gone in round 2, round 3?
I mean, I don't know that Cooper Kupp went late, but he definitely outperformed expectations. And I say that as somebody who missed drafting him. I sat and looked in a lot of drafts and I was like, Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp. And maybe it's my bias as a USC alum, and Robert Woods went to USC, so maybe that was the bias that took me that direction. That was a swing and a miss on my part. And not that Woods was bad; he got hurt, obviously, but he was pretty good. But he was not Kupp. I think he certainly outperformed expectations. I will say that Cordero Patterson was a guy that nobody saw coming. It was a guy that had, for the most part in his career, had been a kick returner, punt returner, was very good at that. But that doesn't get you any real fantasy points. I will say that I sort of, luckily drafted him. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I knew he was going to end up as a top 10 running back this year. I think in a couple of drafts, it was literally a dart throw at the end of a draft. It was like the last pick. And I was like, hey, who's the backup running back in Atlanta? Cordero Patterson. Let's draft him, just sort of on a whim. Let's just kind of take a flyer and see what happens. And it sort of worked out, but I don't think anybody in their right mind, I don't think Cordero Patterson's family would have told you he was going to be a top 10 fantasy running back this year. So that one sort of worked out. Those are the two off the top of my head that jump out as guys who just really, really overperformed expectations.
And I actually have a question from our co-host who can't be here this evening. Like I said, it is his birthday. Andrew is going to have to give context to this. Andrew is our commissioner of our main league, and unfortunately, he finished dead last this year. He sank all the way to the bottom. We deem it the Sacco, as you've probably heard from the fantastic show, The League. Andrew went and earned himself the Sacco, and Andrew probably needs to give context, but Adam was hoping that you could give Andrew some advice for when he enters the fantasy league next season.
Well, first, happy birthday. I'm sorry you couldn't be here. Well, my advice is to not finish last. Look, I think at some point, I always say this: leagues are not necessarily won on draft day. You can have a bad draft, you can still figure out a way to kind of be successful. It just, at some point you just have to start being really active, whether it's waiver wires, whether it's trades. I mean, I think that's just sort of the way, and I feel like those are increasing levels of difficulty, right? Like, drafting, everybody studies for the draft, and you do mock drafts or whatever. Waiver wire is sort of kind of the next level of difficulty, but you can kind of get tips and advice and sort of figure out, who's getting the ball more, who's going to be hot off the waiver wire. Trades is sort of like the upper level of difficulty because it's hard to kind of figure out, one, how much you value a player versus how much somebody else in your league values a player. Maybe you don't particularly love a certain guy, but somebody else in your league does, or vice versa. That's sort of the next level of difficulty. But if you can kind of figure out how to make trades and build through trades, I think it always gives your team a chance, and it always keeps the roster churning. It keeps it a little bit fresh. So I think that is my advice. Other than that, look, I tell people all the time, you study all week long, you do as much prep and research or whatever as you can. You set a lineup based on everything you've tried to learn. Once the game kicks off, it's out of your hands. So there's a little bit of skill. There's a little bit of luck involved too, because you just never know what's going to happen on a week-to-week basis. I mean, that's why it makes it fun, right? If we all knew what was going to happen every single week, I guess binge watching shows is fun and rewatching shows you've already watched is fun. But, in terms of playing games, if you knew how it was going to end, I don't think it'd be nearly as entertaining.
Yeah, I think the guys have thrown me under the bus a little bit there with that. But I finished last this year. It's the first time I've ever finished last. But to this day, and even I've just pulled up my team to have a little look, I'm still really happy with the team that I've got. And I don't know how I finished bottom with the players I have. I feel like this year, every time I played someone, they had a Jonathan Taylor on their team scoring like 4 or 5 touchdowns, or like Deebo Samuel scoring like 30, 40 points, and they just couldn't get out of it. If I just go for a quick drop down my team, I had Russell Wilson, Nick Chubb, Josh Jacobs, James Conner, Keenan Allen, Odell Beckham Jr., Pat Fryer, Michael Pittman, Marquise Brown, Kenny Golladay. I know that was a 14-man league. How's that team finishing bottom?
Yeah, that's a pretty good team for a 14-team league. Just what it sounds like. It sounds like one of those things where, every time, even if you have a good week, you just seems to run up on somebody who's having their best week, right? Like that, and that's a thing that that's the thing you can't control, right? Like if your team has a good week and then somebody else is the high scorer, you can't look out. So this is a little story. The first year I worked at the NFL back in 2011. We were in a league. It was just an office league. It had nothing to do with the show or anything. Just a bunch of us in the office that got together and did one. I went 0 for the season. I didn't win a single game. And it was a lot of times it was, even if I had a good week, somebody else was the high scorer of the week, and that was who I played against. And it was funny and sort of humbling at the same time, because people were like, wait, you're the new fantasy guy we hired and you haven't won a game yet? I'm like, no. And I remember the last week, the guy I was playing against walked by my desk, and he was like, hey, I mean, if you want me to, I can bench my entire lineup and just let you win. And I'm like, that's worse than if I just lose all of my games. I'm like, no, I would rather just lose them all, honestly, than to get a pity win at the end of the season. So sometimes the best laid plans kind of go awry. And so I feel your pain. I understand your situation.
We've also got another question from Adam as well, who's put in, is this is maybe a little bit of a jab at me as a Steelers fan, having to lose Big Ben Roethlisberger now, and the quarterback situation being a little bit up in the air. He's saying, what are you thinking about Deontay Johnson next year? Because he's been one of them ones that maybe scoots under the wire as a wide receiver 1. Is he going to still keep that wide receiver 1 status for a lot of teams next season, even though there is a bit of a quarterback situation in Pittsburgh?
It really does depend on the quarterback situation. Right now, I mean, as of us talking at this very moment, Mason Rudolph looks like he's going to be the starter. I would be very surprised if it is actually Mason Rudolph as the starter when we get to week 1. If by some strange circumstance Mason Rudolph is their starter in week 1, I don't think he's a wide receiver 1. I think he's a kind of a high wide receiver 2. I think the fact that he's still going to be their main target, I think that's going to help him a little bit, but I can't make him a wide receiver 1. Now, if they go out and they make a trade, I mean, for instance, Jimmy Garoppolo has been rumored to be coming to Pittsburgh. We'll see if that happens. But if they do something to kind of upgrade their quarterback position, I think we can still keep him firmly there. But I don't know that we'll get a final answer on that until we get to the summer and we figure out exactly what it is the Steelers are doing at the position.
Oh, I don't even know what the Steelers are doing at the position. I think it is very much in the air about what direction they go. And yeah, Mason Rudolph's the starter rule next year. It doesn't fill me with joy, but we shall see. I like the idea of a Jimmy G trade. That should be good fun if that happens. That's a serviceable quarterback. Andrew, have you got any questions you'd like to fire over to Marcus?
Yeah, it's one that me and Adam were discussing the other day. There's always a punishment for the loser of our fantasy league, and that punishment's now a bit outdated because it was to wear an Andy Dalton Cincinnati Bengals jersey. But, that's pretty cool to be rocking around in a Bengals jersey right now. Is there any punishments that you feel we should bring in, or is there any ones that you've given out to your guys when you've been playing?
You've always seen like the tattoos. I feel like doing tattoos is too harsh. Like I don't want to inflict something that's going to be permanent. I tend to go with the temporary humiliation sort of thing. So it's stuff like, I know that, I've heard of people who have to take college entrance exams, which, it's when you're in your mid 30s or something, and you're sitting in a room full of like 16 and 17-year-olds taking a college entrance exam, that can be kind of funny. Usually like, eating things or having to spend 24 hours in a 24-hour, in an all-night diner, eating is always sort of fun. I played in a league where, the punishment was to be hit with water balloons, but we would do it in the middle of the summer when it was really hot outside. I'm like, this doesn't feel like a punishment, guys. Like, it's really hot. Like, this seems actually kind of like a benefit. So we sort of had to scrap that one away. So I those are the things. The temporary humiliation. I remember I once I lost a matchup. I didn't lose the league, but I lost a matchup with a friend. And so I had to stand out on the street wearing it was like an inflatable sumo suit. I had to stand out on the street wearing an inflatable sumo suit, holding up a sign that says I stink at fantasy football or something like that. So, I think things like that are temporarily humiliations, but that you can get on camera, right? That you can film and show back to the other person years after the fact. I think those things are great.
Yeah, especially with Twitter and Instagram and things like that, I'll be there forever.
They live forever. Yeah, exactly.
I think also when we're looking for next year, obviously the draft's coming in. Is there any guys in that draft that you're looking at possibly picking up in fantasy? I know the two guys from Ohio State are touted to be real good at wide receiver, but who are you looking at from the draft that you might want to pick up in fantasy?
Yeah, I think you talk about those guys in Ohio State are good. Again, this might be my USC bias coming in, but I think Drake London, who's a big-bodied wide receiver, he got hurt midway through the year, but hopefully will be healthy and ready to go. But I think he's a guy that I think right now he's kind of projected to get drafted in the mid to late first round. I've actually seen that maybe the Bills maybe take a shot on him late in the first round, but I think he's a big-body guy. That could be interesting. So again, I will admit to being a little bit of a homer here and taking my fellow USC Trojans, but I'm very curious to see what happens with Drake London and where he goes.
Well, we will start to wrap up this episode of the Franchise Tag Podcast with the hardest question that anyone ever gets when they are coming on a podcast live and anything like that. LA Rams, Cincinnati Bengals, SoFi Stadium, 4 miles from your house, not 4 hours. Who's taking away the Super Bowl this weekend?
I think the Bengals are going to pull it off. I don't know. I think they have found some magic. And I think they kind of get this thing done. I mean, defensively, they're playing really well. I just think they are oozing confidence from everybody at every position. And so I think the other part of it is the thing about the Super Bowl is even though it's played in the Rams Stadium, the Super Bowl tends to be a neutral crowd just because the way tickets are distributed, they're so hard to come by. And so people will snap them up, but they're not necessarily always fans of one team or another. So I don't think it's going to be a situation where the Rams have some great home field advantage or some crowd advantage behind them. I think this is sort of a neutral field situation. And I just think the way the Bengals are playing right now, I think they pull this off and I think they get the win.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of Cincinnati fandom amongst us here on the podcast, even though I'm a Pittsburgh fan. Andrew's a Giants fan. I think the UK, very much a underdog story audience. We always love an underdog over here, and I think there's going to be a lot of Bengals fans. But I think there's going to be a lot of people here that want Stafford to win it. He's paid his dues in Detroit, been part of a bad franchise for a long time. He sort of deserves it in a way as well. Andrew is a bit of a partisan LA Rams fan as well. When his partner was out there in California, they went to see him a lot. So I feel like it's going to be a bit of a Rams-Bengals divide in the front room at your house, Andrew, this week.
Yeah, definitely. I've said it for a little while now. It's one of them where picking. I don't mind who wins this one. It's like a head and heart thing, sort of. I think the Rams should win. My heart with the Bengals because I love the story. So, yeah, I think my partner would be pretty livid if I'm not supporting the Rams.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, Marcus. I really do appreciate it. And again, if you want to enter that competition after we finish this video, go and comment under the YouTube video. Do it on there, not on our social media, who you think will win the Super Bowl, and you can win all of the stuff that I showed earlier. And we will release a photo of that as well to remind you of what you can win. Marcus, thank you again for joining us. We hope you enjoy Super Bowl week in LA, and I'm sure you're going to get up to a lot of fun this week with the NFL.
It should be a lot of fun. I appreciate you guys having me on, and yeah, absolutely. Get your rest, take a nap in the afternoon, so you can enjoy the Super Bowl overnight.
Can't wait for it. Apologies if the Wi-Fi has been a bit funny with me this evening. I do apologise about that to Marcus and to Andrew and to anybody viewing. I will get better at this, I promise. But enjoy your week. Enjoy the Super Bowl. Get the beers in. Get the food in. Book Monday off. And make sure you're wearing your NFL team jersey of choice and enjoying it with your friends. Until then, enjoy the Super Bowl. Goodbye and good night.